All right, so here on the show today, we have Jay from the Ricciardi Group. Jay, thank you so much for hopping on. I tremendously appreciate you taking the time today to, join us.
Excited to be here. Excited to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Absolutely. So Jay and I have been working together for, I think it's over 2 years now, 2.5 years.
I think so. Just over. It's crazy. Time's been
Yeah,
flying, man.
time certainly does. Already Q2 2021. So Jay is the Chief Operating Officer at the Ricciardi Group. From there, I'll let you kind of describe your role, describe the Ricciardi Group, and just kind of let people know who you are and what it is you do.
Yeah, no, totally. So, as you said, I'm the chief operating officer of the Ricciardi Group. The Ricciardi Group is a small B2B boutique marketing strategy and creative firm based out of New York City. So our headquarters are down in Soho. Normally, given given the pandemic and all of that, we are kind of spread out across the country right now. We have colleagues in New Jersey. I'm in Connecticut these days. Still folks in Manhattan, but now we've also kind of started to expand and accept more remote work given the environment that we're in these days. So we've got colleagues in North Carolina, South Carolina, Atlanta, Austin, Chicago, and San Francisco, which is really awesome. It's great to kind of be able to work across all time zones in the country. And especially for our global clients, it's great that we have a colleague in London now these days as well. So we've kind of branched out a little bit further and have gotten out of that EST time zone. But really, we work primarily with financial services firms. We were founded in 2014 by Marissa Ricciardi, who is the former chief marketing officer of the New York Stock Exchange. And so given her background, when we first started the firm, it was all about creating a company that understood the complexity of the financial services business, but is still able to bring the strategic and creative insights of the largest strategy and creative agencies in the world, but really apply it to that business acumen. So that's really our key differentiator. It's all about understanding the business, understanding the outcomes that you need to drive to, and marketing to drive to those outcomes. It's not marketing and messaging for marketing and messaging's sake. It's all about driving to your business outcomes. In terms of my role, I became chief operating officer in January 2020. So a kind of a fun time to take over the reins of that particular role. Which was a stressful time for sure, but we managed as a company. I mean, our team is just incredible, as you know, Sutton. And so we managed to really kind of pivot and really double down during the pandemic. It was a scary few months starting in March. I mean, I was quite transparently, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how many more months we have in front of us as clients started to, shut down campaigns and think about limiting their investments as their own budgets were getting slashed. But, the way that the world works, you never know how things are going to turn around. And, within 3 to 4 months, we actually found that most of our clients were coming back to us with a need for new messaging, right? The world is opening up in some new fashion. It's not what was there before. It's going to be a new kind of hybrid world. And so everyone realized all these plans that we've been developing for the last year, because typically larger firms, want to have a plan for the next 6 to 12 months, all have to be thrown out the window. And so all this work needs to be redone. And it actually ended up being an incredibly exciting time and a really high growth time for us, actually, which is, I'm so fortunate to say that and do not take that for granted at all. But really, my background is actually as a digital marketer.
I was certainly going to dive into that.
Yeah. So when I first left school, I graduated from Trinity College, a small little liberal arts school.
Yeah, and I saw you had a political science degree. I actually didn't know your background before diving in and doing some research here. And I was just like, wow, so political science to marketing to director of, I was just like, that's a pretty crazy, switch of area there. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I loved my liberal arts education, and it's one of the things I say to I have friends that have brothers and sisters that are in high school looking at college right now, and a lot of them are looking for really practical schools. Like I want to be a maybe I want to be a nurse. And so I'm looking at nursing schools sooner rather than later. Or I think I want to go into business or econ. And so they're looking at business schools right away. But to me, the liberal arts education was so, so, so important. And yet it has nothing to do with what I do now. But I actually think that's one of the gems of it. In that, like when I first started, my first semester, I was taking like intro to math because I was horrible at math and I couldn't even like place out of basic math distribution requirements. Like Spanish, intro to computer science, and like religion 201, religion in America. And like what a weird combination of courses.
I was gonna say that literally sounds like the most like jumbled bunch of classes I've ever heard, but
it was crazy. But then the connections that you can start to make across them is just absurd. So like I don't use my religion 201 experience very often, like practically, but I use it all the time, just generally, like understanding how different parts of the country might think, how they came to be developed, why certain people hold certain values, which was like so important, I think, just as a human being and kind of living in society. But then like, my intro to computer science, I was learning Python by the end of it. And I started creating scripts to help me do my math homework. And so, like there was a lot of kind of crossovers. And the more that started happening with more courses and taking more distributions, the more you kind of get to connect things and you see the cross-pollination of all of that learning. But yeah, I ended up having to select a major, obviously. And so I was really interested in political science at the time. I ended up concentrating in comparative studies, comparative politics, with a focus on authoritarian regimes. And the time that I was in school was a really kind of interesting time to be studying that, given we had the Arab Spring happening. So Egypt, we were studying like the 1979 Iran conflicts. We were doing a lot of predictions on the future of China based on everything that we were seeing and the research that was coming out of there. And so it was a really kind of fun and interesting time to be studying authoritarian regimes. And now, as we're seeing kind of the play out of what's happening with Russia and China today, it's really fun to kind of have that background. But for me, it was all about just kind of getting the most broad understanding of what I possibly could out there, and kind of learning as much as I possibly could to be as well-rounded as possible as an individual, thinking that, it'll end up serving me well into the future. I didn't have any idea I wanted to be a marketer. I was actually staring down my graduation date and I was like, oh,
that was going to be my next question, was like, how then? Because that's literally night and day.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, shit, what am I going to do? And I was like, all right, I've got this political science major. Maybe I can do like the foreign service. So I was like, maybe I'll go to school and like try to be an ambassador. And then I was like, that's not for me. I hate politics. Like, why would I do that? And so I started to kind of get a little bit desperate, and I was thinking of a lot of different things. I was like, maybe I'll go teach English in China for a few years, because it was really easy to do that. And I was like, I can go study. I just spent a lot of time studying China. It would be cool to be there and kind of experience their culture firsthand. But ultimately, and I think that the key theme in my career thus far has been, it's all about people, and it's all about taking chances and saying yes to things that kind of feel risky. And so what ended up happening is I was closer to my graduation date. An alumni from my fraternity had reached out, and it's actually an even crazier story than that. I don't know if we want to get into it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely want to.
Now we have to hear.
Yeah, come on now.
So I mean, it was just like random how it all happened. It was actually kind of like a shitty situation, but at our fraternity, I was a senior at the time, and this idiot sophomore had a bad relationship with his girlfriend. And it got to the point where she unfortunately accused him of raping her at a party one night. And so, the school, to their credit, takes it very, very seriously, started a whole Title IX investigation, brought in Holland and Knight from Boston, and God knows how much money they spent on these attorneys, probably like over $1 million. They had like 6 or 7 of them on campus for like 4 months. it essentially totally shut down our senior year, right? Like, and as a brother of the house, having nothing to do with it, you're like all of a sudden a social pariah, right? It's like, ooh, those guys are the rapists. And so it was, it was a really tough senior year. It was also incredibly stressful because all of this was happening during midterms, and we were getting every brother had to be interviewed by attorneys, and it was a whole.
Yeah, and you're just trying to be a college kid at that point. You
just want to be a college kid.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
And as seniors, we're like, we just met this kid, like, fuck him. Like, I just want to live out my life and like leave me alone.
I was gonna say, especially like of all years, your senior year, like I'm just trying to ride off in the sunset. Like I want to go out with, I'm just trying to enjoy my last year here. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. But our school, and especially our fraternity, has an incredible alumni network. So what ended up happening is all of these guys, I mean, there's guys that had kids that are in the frat right away, and of course they were coming in, but there was just guys from the alumni network that were like, we're here to support you guys. And so they ended up hiring an attorney for us, like out of their own pockets. They actually hired the guy who had defended the Duke lacrosse players. So like a real big swinger from New Jersey. And there was like this big group that kind of swarmed in and was on campus often. And so the silver lining is we ended up meeting a lot of really great people that we would have never met otherwise. And that's actually where I met this guy, Henry, who had just started a new job at ComplySide down in New York, and was going to take over as their chief marketing officer. And so as a part of it, he was like, I'm looking for an intern for the summer. If anybody has someone that's interested in an internship, let me know. And so I was like, hell yeah, like I'll raise my hand for that. It's crazy because I think this is also a theme of people are lazy, man. People don't take advantage of opportunities. So I reached out, like that day to say, I'd love to be a part of this, or I'm interested. I think I was one of maybe 2 out of 65 that had even like responded to that offer for that opportunity.
That's nuts to hear.
Yeah, if someone's giving you an opportunity, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? So anyways, I ended up meeting Henry. I ended up meeting some of his other team members through the interview process, and we hit it off. And he's like, join us. Can you be down here in 2 weeks? And I was like, oh shit. I don't think I can, but let me figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like yes, and then in the background you're just scrambling to get your entire life in order.
So my college roommate Andrew, his family was incredibly generous, and Andrew was actually moving to Salt Lake to go work for Goldman at the time. So he wasn't even going to be in New Jersey. His family was right across the river from Manhattan in New Jersey, but his parents, who I met maybe 8 times throughout our college experience, were like, you can move in with us and you can stay with us for the first month and kind of commute. And they were just incredible in putting me up for those first probably 6 weeks while I was figuring it out, and then ended up moving into Jersey City for a few months to kind of just settle down a little bit. And it was just an internship. I was making like $10 an hour at the time, which is now super illegal in New York. But I found out, like I got to experience marketing. And I don't think I would have really fallen in love with marketing if I didn't have the exact experience that I had, which was I've always been like obsessed with technology. I'm a big Apple fanboy. I've got like every piece of tech Apple's ever made, for better or worse. Does not help the pocketbook. But I love technology. And one of the first projects they assigned to me was, they're like, we just bought this piece of marketing automation, technology tool. And they're like, we need to figure out how to use it. This is like what your website gets hooked up to, how you send all of your emails as a B2B firm, how you do lead scoring, like how you track the entire funnel. And so that was my project, and I had to just kind of figure it out on my own. So I was watching a ton of YouTube videos, taking courses by the company, Pardot was what we were using at the time, and just figuring it out. And I absolutely fell in love with the technology side of marketing. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool. I never knew there was like systems and all of this tech that's involved in it. And then as I started getting deeper in there, you start doing demand gen, and you start to kind of learn the psychology of marketing and A/B testing, and why a subject line matters, and how to speak to your audience, and how do you build a persona. And that all started to become really compelling to me. And then I got a little bit deeper on like the operations side of things, which was working with our finance team to understand like how can we increase conversions, how can we tee up better leads that will convert better for sales that turn into higher value deals. And so I started spending a lot of time with sales operations and a lot of time with finance, like really dig into the numbers, really understand how we're going to drive this thing forward in the most efficient way possible. And I think that's where I first really started to love like process and numbers and like the business building side of what before was a little bit more qualitative in marketing. And so that was really my start in marketing. And the next 2 to 3 years was really just honing in on those skills, building those skills, discovering new ways of doing things, scanning the industry to understand what are the new and innovative ways others are doing things. And the Picasso quote of the best artists steal, just stealing as many ideas as possible
Absolutely.
from as many other companies as possible and implementing them for ourselves and optimizing and moving forward. And so that's really how I got my start and really kind of where my heart continues to be as a marketer. I love everything digital. I love the kind of operation side of it. I hate campaigns that I can't like analyze and understand exactly what happened from it. Like, did we have good results? Did we drive to the outcomes that we were looking for? And so that was really my background. And then, working at a small agency, there's always a million things that could be getting done that aren't getting done. And so I remember, when I first joined, there was 4 of us in a room on Fulton Street in New York. And Marissa was talking about, I joined in September. Marissa was talking about vacations that were coming up in the future. And she was like, if you have a vacation, just like down on this piece of paper that's on my wall. And like, that's how we'll track vacation. I was like, we use like Google Calendar. Why don't we just have like a vacation calendar? And she's like, oh, you're so smart. Like, set it up. So I was like, okay. Okay, I'll set it up. And so it was like kind of the snowball effect of like all these other little things. I was like, well, why aren't we doing this? And she was like, well, then why don't you just do it? And so I kept doing more and more of that. And we kind of, that's how I started building out like our little operations team. And then, over the last 3 or 4 years now, that's how it evolved into this role where it's now my full-time function.
Absolutely. Yeah. So obviously you spent roughly 5 years, in marketing, I'll say. How did that kind of, and you kind of alluded to it, but how did that jump to, I think it was director of strategy, or I'm trying to think of your first title.
Director of client strategy, which is like
Client
a very
strategy. So obviously still a little bit of a jump, title wise from marketing. So how did that first opportunity, with Ricciardi Group, as you said, some of the intros, but like kind of walk me through that process of, landing that role, making that jump, because that obviously set your career on another, what I would say, trajectory and where you were heading.
Yeah, I mean, again, man, it's all about people. It's all about people. So, I was at Comply Sci for about a year and a half. And then there was, and it was founder led at the time. It was led by the same guy since 2007. And he was an incredibly well-connected guy, an incredibly good salesperson. Can't discount that side of things. He was honestly a rather shitty person, and not the best leader of people. And that started getting more and more exposed over the years, especially as the company started scaling.
Which is fairly common. I mean, like a lot of people, like a lot of founders don't wind up being the long-term, CEO.
100%, 100%, especially first time founders. I mean, it's
1,000%.
it's hard because we see so many really successful companies with still being led by founders, right? Like Jack Dorsey and Twitter and so many others, Elon Musk and Tesla. And I think we all kind of latch onto those and think that's like the standard path. And it's those are like the 0.001% of founders that successfully run a company to scale. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Sutton. I mean, it normally turns out that a founder cannot lead the company all the way through its growth. And so that was kind of, I got to experience that transition, which was a very tough transition. I mean, it was board led. The founder did not want to go, but they pushed him out and they brought in the executive chairman at the board, took over as interim CEO, an amazing guy, David Eisner, incredible mentor to me over that period of time. He had started a company called themarkets.com, which he sold to McGraw-Hill. and made like a small little fortune for himself. I'm sure he wouldn't like me saying that, but he did did really well for himself in that sale, and honestly probably didn't need to work anymore. But then continued to advise a lot of companies, and sat on the board of ComplySci, took over as interim CEO, and then brought in a guy that had worked with him, his president at themarkets.com, Jean-Marc Levy. And Jean-Marc was also the head of New York Stock Exchange governance services. So very much kind of on the compliance, governance, risk side of things at the NYSE, and very integrated in the financial services ecosystem. So we were a compliance technology firm. It was a really strong fit. So he tapped Jean-Marc to come over and take over as CEO, and Jean-Marc did. Jean-Marc was a total opposite of the CEO before him. Incredible leader of people, very inspiring, very process oriented, incredibly buttoned up. Like, this is not a guy that you want to make a typo in an email and send to him. And so I think that's where I first realized oh shit, we've got to really be buttoned up in everything that we do. It's not just the important things. Every little touch point is important. And so he ended up letting go of my boss. So I was, and my immediate boss had quit. And so I was going to end up being the only person on the marketing team. And I was pretty terrified, being that I was like a 22-year-old kid, a year out of school. And I was like, oh fuck, I think I'm done. I think I might be next. But he was great. He pulled me aside and he's like, look, you're a rock star. You're not going anywhere, but leadership is not doing what it needs to do right now. I kind of need to build out a new leadership team for myself. And so he ended up telling me he was going to bring in this consultant who he had worked with at the New York Stock Exchange, Marissa Ricciardi, to kind of be my new boss and to be the new leader of the department. And so within a month or two, the contract was signed and I met Marissa for the first time. And I remember being scared shitless. I mean, she was so direct.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, I can certainly understand that, even from the few times that her and I have obviously chatted.
So, but she was so great at the same time. I mean, the first thing, she sat me down and she's like, "I heard you're awesome. I believe it. We're gonna do a lot of good shit together. Based on what I know, this company's got a lot of trajectory, and there's a good enough foundation, but you guys aren't doing nearly enough, and we're going to get there together." And she really took me under her wing quickly. And there's just a way about her. I mean, within a month, I fully trusted her. And I was working with Meredith, who you've probably interacted with a bit, Sutton. And I just really kind of fell in love with that working environment. We all collaborated so well together. And we were driving really great results quickly. Within the first 3 to 4 months together, we had outpaced anything we had ever done at the company in the, whatever it was, 7 years prior, the previous marketers. And so it was just a really exciting, fun time to be working together. And that happened for about a year and a half. Then I had a new VP got hired, who was, a strong VP, really knew what she was doing. But just given the politics of the firm, given that I had been there for a few years already, a couple years, I wasn't so keen on staying anymore. And so as I was getting less and less happy, and visibly less happy, Marissa started to tease out, there's other options. There's other options at other firms, but there's also an option at my firm should you want it.
I love it.
And so kind of when I hit my breaking point, I was originally going to join my buddy's startup. He had a small little cleaning company, a cleaning app company. It competes with Handy. So if you want to get your bathroom cleaned, you can it's like the Uber of cleaning apps. He was starting that out, and I was originally going to jump ship and join him. And then I realized it was all going to be on upside, and I actually needed to be able to feed myself. And
I was going to say, yeah, actually had to put food on the table.
Yeah, exactly. It's shit, I've got an apartment in New York. I need money. So I ended up joining Marissa. And it was kind of, taking a chance, man. Like I had no idea what I was about to join. I knew nothing about consulting. I knew nothing about the agency world. And I assumed I was going to be the dumbest person joining with, like 2 years of experience and never having worked at an agency before. So it was a real leap of faith at the time. And I remember even when I joined, I was like, holy shit, this company is so much smaller than I thought it was. Like Marissa's so good at like selling the vision and selling what it is. Like I was honestly thought like when I walked in the first day, it was going to be like 15 people and like a big office. And she's like, yeah, you're like one of three. And like we have this corner and a sublet office. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do?
So, I thought I wasn't joining a freak. No.
Yeah. So it was a little scary at first, but I mean, you just embrace opportunity. I was like, I made this decision. This is what I want for myself. I was unhappy. Like I got to make the best of this. And just started rolling up my sleeves and that's where I started exposing other opportunities for myself. I was like, we could be doing this and we're not. So why don't we do it? And it just, became like a culture of raising your hand. You want to do something, you think something can get pushed further, you just raise your hand and you do it. And it worked. And so that's kind of how I continued to evolve that role.
Absolutely. So I guess how did it lead to the COO role? Because that's obviously, I'm not a title happy person. I've always joked about it. I mean, now I am. I want to be master of coin at every place I ever work now. But like obviously but titles, titles are a sought after thing. So how did you get to that? Like what led to that coveted, COO type title?
Yeah, I mean, I think the COO title is a little bit of bullshit. And I actually love it. I forget who it was. I wish I could attribute this properly, but someone had said, like titles are cheap and there actually should be one of the top things you use to negotiate, especially if you're a young company. Money is very finite and you never know how much more money you have coming in. Hopefully you have a healthy business, but you never know, right? You could have a downwind and not be doing as well in 6 months. And so you don't want to constantly be increasing your overhead. And so, this is me sitting from like the business perspective of it, not from my own personal perspective of it. If you can use a title to make someone happy instead of 20 grand, use the fucking title. As long as that is not strategically putting you at a disadvantage. Right. So like, don't put someone that sucks at technology in the CTO title just to save yourself some money because you want to hire a CTO at some point.
And like something that I've seen too is like also don't don't over give a title to make someone happy too, because that's going to set them up for long-term failure. Like I've seen people that, are doing bookkeeper accountant tasks that are like, oh, I was a CFO. It's like, no, you worked for just a really small startup that literally only needed bookkeeping, and they called you the CFO. You don't actually have that experience. Like you can't actually do the job. So I completely get that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I think, part of it is titles are cheap, and I think I ended up pushing on it at one point. I was like, I want this fucking title, just because it makes me feel validated, and it's my own like psyche thing. But no, I mean, how did I get to that role regardless of title? It was honestly what I was just describing of just like raising your hand. When you see something that can be done better and you think that you can do it. And this is the other thing. Like I fucking hate people who complain or identify a problem and don't have a solution. It's like, if you're not willing to be a part of the solution, don't highlight the problem.
Absolutely. Which is crazy, by the way, and I think it's something that people don't really understand how much of that actually goes on and how noticeable it is to executive staffs to, it's bonkers to me. In every single role I've ever had, that's literally been the pretty much uniform, understanding and perspective of the executive team. Now, a lot of executives think that way too. Like they're very good at highlighting problems, but they're not solution oriented. But you really find that the people that grow and basically get to pick and choose, their careers are the people that are the latter, not the former. Like even if people can't direct the problem, but if you can bring them problems and they can solve them, those are the $1 million people. Those are the people that all of us go after.
100%. And, I think there's multiple levels to it too. Like you don't always have to be the person that's like going to solve it. Right. But I think if you can identify a problem and be willing to participate in the solution,
exactly. Yep.
That's the key. And then if you can lead the solution, even better. Take it a level further. That's awesome. But the people, I mean, and that's just part of the reason I left my last company too, is we had one person in particular who was like the chief problem identifier, and they just were like, oh, this is a problem, and like love to highlight it, and like would put it in every deck and like every presentation, be like, but what about that problem that I identified? But when it was like, well, let's talk about a solution, they were like, yeah, no,
and they're like, no,
yeah, yeah, no, you
understand
see,
that.
I'm really busy, and that solution's kind of your problem, but the problem's still a problem. So can you like solve the problem? And it's like, no, that's not how this works.
I literally have one of those. It was the worst example in my last CFO role I had. There was a gentleman who was a textbook example of that, and so much so that like even as you'd identify a problem, you're working towards a solution. We were running, I won't go into obviously the specifics, but we were running pretty much a manufacturing company. We were running a pretty process shift of the shop floor, and which was a big undertaking, for every single step along the way, this guy would be the absolute loudest in the room to, here was the problem, we're working towards it, but he would always highlight, oh, well, you like made this correction, but now this is the problem that you're still running into. It's like, I know that, but we're one step, but this is a process. This isn't an overnight fix. This is like, I get it that the problem's there, but then he was never involved in any of the discussions of, oh, that efficiency number is now off, and that's what I would like to see. But it's like, I know, but we had to correct this first. We're reverse engineering this problem. We're like, there's nothing more frustrating sitting in a room with someone that just calls out everything that you're doing wrong and not highlighting. And not that you want, you don't want yes people around you, but oh my gosh, it was brutal.
Infuriating. Yeah. It's infuriating, and it totally kills morale. And the people who are trying to solve things are like, look, are you ever going to be happy? Or is it always going to be another problem? And it totally kills the ability to really move things forward. And as you said, make progress. And I think so many people, what's the saying? I'm going to totally botch it. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. It's like sometimes you have to just make progress and get to the good enough.
Enemy of progress. It's something like that, or
exactly. And look, perfect can be the goal, the end goal. Like let's try to work towards that. But let's make real progress in the meantime. If we just try to say, look, let's put perfect on a pedestal and let's only turn it on when we get there, you're never getting there.
And that's the thing. It's like, and the word perfection is such it's really an unattainable word, no matter what project, no matter if it's in your personal life, business life, no process, procedure, any sort SOP, whatever you set up, it's never going to be 100%. And we run into that all the time. And we just had an hour or 2 hour talk a few weeks ago about all these things. Nothing's ever going to be 100%. And that type of mentality or morale individual who always is going to point out the things that aren't working right is going to really, I don't know if this is the word, but de-highlight the progress and achievement that you are making. And it's such a crazy thing to me, because when you point out all the ways that something's not going to work, it forces people not to start, whether it's in the personal life or in business, and especially when you're talking about trying to do something that gets an entire team on board from a business perspective. I've gone into meetings before and pitched, I had an opportunity to basically build a cost accounting, build, the entire, manufacturing accounting for a business doing $30 million a year. And I walked into a room and said, in 6 months, we're going to be able to track every single cost. We're going to have, accurate inventory numbers. We're going to be running reporting. We're going to and it was this thing, and I just got every single reason why it wasn't going to work. And that's not my mentality to hear that and go, and hear that and be deterred, I suppose. But it was crazy to me that and these are people that, I think at the time I was 21. So kind of similar to your story, where you're thrust into this opportunity. And I'm talking to people that are, in their 40s, 50s and stuff like that. And I'm like, why are if this is their mindset, I was saying am I crazy? Am I the one that's wrong? And if I shouldn't, should I even start then? Because why would I waste my time? I could just spend it doing, run of the mill tasks and just, grow the organic way and stuff like that. But luckily my mindset and attitude was different. That no, I'm going to be able to accomplish it. We're going to be able to set out and do it. I know the obstacles, but we'll overcome them. That's such a deterrent for people to be around those type of individuals and that type of mindset, because if you're always going to seek how far perfection is away, which is not attainable, but if you really, but if you rest your laurels on that, you're never going to start then either. Which it's one of those, to throw another cliche at it, I'd rather, if you shoot for the stars, you still land on the moon, and I'd rather get to the moon than just sit on Earth my entire life too. So I think that's a really important kind of facet or
No,
no.
no, and I think one of the things that you just highlighted there is so important too. I remember when I was, in school, one of my professors had said, "Question everything," and it was one of my favorite pieces of advice because I think it's so true outside of school too. I mean, he was like, "You learn something and you don't quite understand it, or you want to push on it, question everything." And look, education, like we go into these academic environments and we think like all this shit is 100% true. This was written by fallible people, right? Like the victors write history, whatever. Like truth is just a perception, like a commonly accepted perception of a
Absolutely.
particular scenario. So question it, try to get to the other perspective. What was the perspective that didn't make it into the books, right? And if you
Absolutely.
do that, and like the same thing with like these 40 or 50-year-olds as a 21-year-old kid, you're probably like, fuck, they probably know a lot more than me. They've been working for
Exactly.
as long as I've been alive. But question everything. Do these people actually understand what they're doing? This makes intuitive sense to me. So did they just learn this and they've been sticking to it their entire lives? Like
Mhm.
question it, be willing to disrupt things. Things need to be revalidated multiple times. And so just because
Absolutely.
something was validated 20 years ago doesn't mean it's still going to be validated today.
1,000%. And like I didn't even take that a step further. So and I'm sure this is kind of what you meant, but you mentioned question everything that's not 100. I even question, and not that I'm some insane person, but I even question things that people tell me are right, because that's actually the truths that people are loudest about are actually the ones that I question the most. Because stuff that is wrong, at least we're all admitting that it's wrong. But the things that people hold highest to be truths are the things I want to question the most. And that can go in life, but especially I know we're kind of talking in business, because it's funny to me that um, have you ever heard the turkey story, like the family Thanksgiving turkey, where the turkey's cut in half? You ever heard that?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
so yeah, so it's kind of one of those like old like cliche type of stories, but it's like but it's always proved this point perfect for me. Like this family on Thanksgiving always cuts the turkey in half, and the granddaughter asked the mom, well, why do we cut this turkey in half? Oh, well, this is, well, this is the best flavor. This is this. It does, she gives 1,000 reasons as to why they cut the turkey in half. And she's like, I'm just not sure. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I had turkey over at my friend's house. It tastes the exact same. I don't get it. So she goes to grandma, and goes, Grandma, why do we cut the turkey in half? The tradition started with you. What's the story here? And she goes, oh, well, my mom did it because we didn't have an oven big enough to fit the turkey. So we cut it in half and we had to cook one half at a time or whatever. Yeah. So there's all these stories about why these things work or why they have to be this way and why we do them. But when you get back to the source of it, you don't actually know, how it originated or how it started. So I've always, in any situation, I always ask the 5 whys, even if something is right, because you never know if that's actually the most efficient process, if that was actually the best, method to go about doing it. Because really, it works for where you're at, but at one point that could have worked because it was solving an inefficiency that's no longer a bottleneck. And that's helped me tremendously throughout my career.
100%. I love that point because there's always probably a core reason that's not right there front and center for why things are done the way they're done. And so you got to question things to get down to the root of it and really understand, why is this happening the way it's happening? And is this the best way? I find myself questioning myself a lot too, like things that 2-hour session you just mentioned. A lot of those were things that we set up a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we've evolved since a year. And so it's like, okay, well, you need to start questioning, like, is this still the right way to be doing things? Are there ways to do this better? And like constantly just questioning everything, not to like make it impossible to make any progress,
No, of course
but
not.
in the spirit of constantly trying to improve things and constantly trying to find the best or the better way of doing something. It doesn't have to be, I think a lot of people too think it has to be like this big monumental change and you have to move these big rocks, but it's actually, you can move little pieces here and there, and the compounded effect of doing that in a lot of different places can be really monumental. And so, it's also question little things. You don't have to move a big rock every day. A lot of little rocks moved, adds up to that bigger rock.
1,000%. And to kind of build into that with the title that you now have, and yeah, for one way or another, like I've always found it to be very interesting that there are somewhat foundational tasks and responsibilities for CEOs, CFOs, chiefs of staff, CTOs and stuff like that. But really, every company, has their own definition of what that position looks like for them.
Yeah.
So, how would you say, you're being utilized in that COO role? Where do you find yourself providing the most value? What do you, find yourself doing day to day? Because I think that's really interesting to someone that maybe, is striving to, someday hit that role, to find, that there are so many different specifics of how you can excel within that position.
Yeah. I mean, I think the COO role in particular is a really hard one to define. And actually, Harvard Business Review, probably 10 years ago now, if not more, wrote an article about the role of the COO, and they identified, I think, 7 different types of COOs. And like, there's more than that, but that's just kind of what they had identified in their research. And I can't name them off the top of my head, but I definitely recommend reading that article. And it kind of dives into the different ways that a COO can function. And a lot of it has to do with your CEO. What are they really strong at? What do they want to be doing? Because oftentimes, your COO is really a complement to the CEO. The CEO should be higher level, more vision setting, et cetera. Your COO should be more creating the structure, defining how things are actually going to get done. But also, you shouldn't have a CEO and a COO that are strong at the same things, because then you're doubling down on one role, and you're missing a lot of other things. And so, it really ends up taking so many different shapes because everyone's different, right? And every CEO is going to be a little bit different, and they need a different type of COO. I think another person who does a really great job explaining this, I had shared it with you, Sutton Cameron Harold, and his book Vivid Vision. He's written a bunch of books, but he's got a great podcast too, called Second in Command. Plug him real quick, just because it's all about COOs, and it's all about that role, and he dives into that. I think it's my role in particular is interesting in the way that it evolved, because it started with me doing like literally just everything, right? Like a new contractor was being onboarded, they need an email address, like create a new email address.
And if I may interject for 1 second, people who are watching this, Jay literally did like he's not that's not an exaggeration. You literally like I've seen it firsthand. Like that literally meant everything. Like oversaw, had your hands in, and handled everything.
Yeah. I mean, it was nothing was off limits. And the really hard part when I first started taking on this role is I had 3 clients, I think. So like I was a full-time, 2 would be considered to be kind of like maxed out. And I had 3 clients. So I was like already at like, 110, 120% like capacity as a digital marketer. And then I was doing all this shit on the side, but I really liked this side of it, because I was like, I don't know, I'm just attracted to it. But yeah, I mean, like when it came down to like, we needed office space, like I was the guy that was out there looking up offices in Manhattan, calling up real estate companies, getting tours, going and seeing them, negotiating rates. When we ended up moving offices, I mean, it was me, Marissa, Rishi, packing shit into the back of his car and like, hauling it across town. Setting up the internet. I was like the trash dude when like we first had our new office, right? Like no one wanted to take the trash out. I was like, fuck, I guess I'll take the trash out. It was literally everything. I mean, getting HVAC permits for our new HVAC system, dealing with what I think is the mob in New Jersey for our garbage contract, because apparently you have to pay a separate rate to have your garbage taken out of your building. So like all of those little things, on top of hiring strategies, business analysis, creating a proper trajectory for the business and understanding what's really doable, understanding where like our capabilities map, like where are we really strong in our services? Where are we really weak right now? Where do we want to be strong, but we need to source in-house versus externally? Where can we continue with more of an arbitrage model and have a really strong set of contractors that we're able to pull in and utilize for key capabilities? And like, where does that make more sense than bringing things in-house? And so, I was doing a lot of it. The higher value stuff is absolutely on like the planning and how do we properly structure ourselves to get to the next level of growth. The things that are time sucks are all of the like nitty gritty. Like I shouldn't be setting up new email addresses for new contractors, or all of those little things. I shouldn't be calling FDNY to make sure that our HVAC permit is going to be renewed. Those just aren't things that are going to be high value for the business, but they're things that need to get done.
See, and I really want to hone in on that because, like, as we talk about these things, and there's a lot I want to unpack from, really like everything that you've been talking about, but I want to hone on this one just to not miss the opportunity to do so. I think the most crucial thing that people can take from everything that you just said is the fact, I don't think, and I'm using a generality that probably can be poked holes in, but to a large perspective, there are very few people in any sort of, at least what I've seen in a CEO, a CFO, a COO, that have been handed the position that haven't had some sort of the example that you just shared. Like for my story, like when I was in my first, really controller role, I used to restock all of the, the fridges and stuff like that for all the meetings that we have. I used to restock, the fridges, the freaking, snacks. I used to handle the front desk, so any foot traffic that would walk in and stuff. And I could have had an office, but I looked at the budget and said, and they literally asked me, they're like, we can hire someone for the front desk to do the phones, to handle all the walk-in traffic, to do all this. And I was like, no, screw it. Like, I don't even know. Throw me at the front desk. Like, and are those tasks, like, I like the way that you said it. It's like, should those be the tasks that, a controller, CFO, COO is doing? No. But you understand that there is no task that is beneath anyone. And no matter where you get to, no matter what status you have, no matter what role you're in, if shit needs to get done, you're actually the one, in my opinion, that should go out and freaking do it, because you've been given that responsibility, that title, and you have to live up to when shit needs to get done. You're the one that has to stay the extra hour, not your staff. You're the one that has to stock it, not your, assistant. And I really want to hone in on that point because you touched on it. But I think someone would listen to that and let's brush over it. It needs to get the appreciation that it deserves.
I think that is like the golden point, and I think it's something that we really try to suss out when we're hiring, especially for more senior roles, because not everyone thinks that way. A lot of people came up through the ranks and did do all that shit, right? Mm-hmm. But they get to that senior position and they're like, exactly what you're just saying. Oh, it's beneath me now, right? Like I can't do that because it's literally beneath me. Like someone that won't go fill up the pitcher of water for the client meeting because like I'm just too senior for that now. And it's like abso-fucking-lutely not. If that pitcher needs to be filled and you're capable of doing that and no one else is able to, go fill the pitcher. That's like it's literally that.
And what's nuts, like hearing you use that example, if I like I've had examples, now this is, putting the other cap on where I'm the customer, the visitor, potential client, whatever you want to say. If I walk in to a meeting room and the fridge isn't stocked and or there's a pitcher of water or you see that they had a snack drawer but it's 75% depleted, I don't think, oh, here, like their assistant slacking. The person that I'm sitting across from, I think, is a fuck up. Because I'm like, you're either not directing people the right way and you're not seeing that this is a problem. Those are the small things that I look at and think you don't have a tip-top operation here. And it's small shit. And even if I'm not gonna eat any snacks or don't even want to drink, you just look for that stuff to see, because if that's how you treat, your day-to-day operation, how am I gonna trust you with either my clients, or do I wanna work with you? Do we want to partner? Because that's like the little stuff. And I never put it on the assistant, even if it's completely their fault. Then you hired the wrong person. You didn't train them right. You didn't grab lead and see that it was a problem 5 minutes before I walked in here. And I don't know if you're the same way, but I put that 110% on that individual's shoulders.
Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, I take it further, which is I believe whoever manages a particular department is ultimately always the person who is responsible. And it drives me insane when someone senior wants to say, oh, I'm so sorry, that was whoever messed that up, and like to try and deflect the blame, right, to keep their own reputation. And I actually think that makes you look 10 times worse than just saying, I'm so sorry, this is my bad. It's ultimately always your responsibility. And I think when it comes down to like delegation and like what are high value tasks versus low value tasks, every single task is important. But what it ultimately comes down to is value. Different people get paid different amounts. And so the question at the end of the day is, if we're talking about like on a standard day, does it make sense for someone that's getting paid 3 times more than another person to be doing tasks that could easily be getting done?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it just comes down to like, from a financial point of view, it's better to have the higher paid people focusing on the quote unquote higher value things than the lower paid people focusing on the quote unquote lower value things. Not that any task has, is more menial than another. It's just, the way that business works, but every single person should be willing to get down in the trenches and deal with those quote unquote low value tasks because they still need to get done.
1,000%. And I want to hit on that point. It's a little bit in left field, but you just mentioned it. I think we're a little too, PC on higher value and low value tasks. I don't know if it's those words that typically trigger people, but at the end of the day, like all higher in value, just to like how at least I view that and how I typically describe it, whether it's to my staff or companies that I work with, it's tasks that more people can do. It has nothing to do with higher value or lower value, and this is kind of how I've navigated that PC use of the of the terminology. Yeah. And it's just you're basically, and like this is how I look at pay too. You're paid based on what you can do that other people can't. If you do a job that's flipping, that's at McDonald's, the reason that doesn't pay as much as a COO, which sounds crazy obviously, but like the reason is because you can't strategize, or as a CFO because you can't. You don't know how to put together financials, you know how to analyze financials. But I mean, I'm actually pretty shitty with food, so I'm probably a horrible freaking example because I would probably get fired. But but a lot of people can, dip fries into it. It's just you're basically paid according to how many people could step in and do the job that you're doing. So it's not about it being higher value or lower value. It's just how, at what level, at what tier is your task, and how many people are within that tier that can perform at an equal rate to how you perform at it. So I think that's kind of how I've always viewed that. And yes, you want your COOs, your CFOs, your executives to be focusing on tasks that only they can do, because you don't want to pay them to do a task that somebody else can do, because you are paying them exponentially more money. So they better be putting their time and effort into stuff that no one else can take on or handle.
Right. No, and I think, I love that. And I think if you think about it, I just like drew a picture while you were talking, so many people, this PC is because like, you don't want to see yourself at the top, right? And like everyone else is beneath you. But if you think about exactly what you're just saying, just flip a pyramid.
Literally, I pitch that in every consulting meeting I've ever had. I love that. I'm not going to cut you off, but the inverted pyramid is literally my go-to.
And really what you were just describing is just a funnel, right? Like if you throw as many people as possible at the top of the funnel, most of those people might be able to do a certain task. Mm-hmm. But then how many people can convert into the next set of tasks that require a little bit more skill? And how many people can convert into that next tier of a set of tasks that, require a little bit more skill and know-how and experience? And then ultimately, it's actually the most quote unquote valuable people are the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the people who get filtered down and can handle those particular tasks. And so, I think psychologically it's the same shit, but I think psychologically people like to see people at the bottom versus at the top.
And actually I love this because we're just taking everything one step further. The reason that I always use the inverted pyramid is honestly to just as much for what you said, but almost more importantly, it's to knock on the fucking egos of the executive staff. Because I can't stand when people look at a pyramid, this way, and then believe that, well, I'm at the top of the pyramid, so now everyone else, has to answer to me. Everyone else has to. When you think like that, your shit is so broken, because business is actually run, if you look at the foundation of the company, on the executive staff. So every single one of those employees actually relies on the decisions you make. So if you're making shitty decisions and building a shitty culture and building a shitty foundation for the company down here, you're fucking it up for each one of these people. And if these people are not doing their jobs, it's because you're not doing your job. And that's why I always like pitching that to executive staffs, because they don't realize, when you look at it this way, they think, well, this shit's wrong, so these people are fucking up, it's all here, but I'm doing mine. No, it's actually you're the one fucking up, and that's why these people can't do their jobs. And I actually even go so far when I do, consulting or jobs that I've worked at, when I build that inverted pyramid out, and you have, the company, why am I blanking? It's not the company hierarchy. What is it called? The company chart, the organization chart. Whenever I build out a simple org chart built that way, it's always really interesting to me, because you can find the executives that are actually the ones fucking up by building it and saying, what employee's having this problem? Okay, who does he report to? And then is the bottleneck at the manager level? Is that the executive level? At what point is some manager fucking up that this employee can't do their job? And it literally is foolproof. And that's why when you mention the inverted pyramid, I just get excited, because that's literally where I always start. So it just got me super pumped.
Yeah. No, and if someone's like, fuck the inverted pyramid, then you just take the pyramid and it's just you turn it into a waterfall. It's not a pyramid anymore.
Yeah, fine. Exactly. However you want to look at it.
What do you want to use for the type of landscape?
It's like, no, your decision's still.
At the end of the day, you're still the problem.
Exactly.
No, that is awesome. I love that you brought that up. And this is the type of stuff that I really want to continue to dive into a bit, because as you were talking, I had so many of these like light bulb moments, and you were running it, so I didn't want to cut you off. And I know I can do that at times, like sometimes to a fault. But you said so much, like throughout telling your story, you said so much about you, and it literally paints a perfect picture as to how you've gotten where you've gotten. And I just want to continue kind of diving into that. So when you mentioned the college thing, and actually I hope Sam really listened to that. So Sam has a degree in, that he can kind of speak to it, but he has a degree in health and wellness.
Yeah, now I'm running all his social platforms and making sure the studio's set up, like doing some video editing, all that, nothing related to what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis now. And that's even with a lot of people that I know that I went to school with. They're doing things that they graduated in the same degree I got, but it's not what they're doing on their day-to-day tasks. But it's just, what do you take from those experiences? And if you take things more of a well-rounded approach, you look at everything and try to put it into a different lens of what you're actually doing. There's so much you can learn from really everything that you do on a day-to-day basis.
100%. And I think, one of the most dangerous things we have in how our human mind works these days is like, we like to categorize everything. And it's like, fuck that. Like, you don't need to categorize anything, right? Like, we as human beings are incredibly fluid. And so it's more about how do you harness all of your experiences and that fluidity, because also you have the ability to change so much in the future to just create what you want for yourself. I mean, my brother is a lawyer. He's been practicing for 3 years, obviously went to law school for 3 years, all of that. He loves fly fishing and just created like a fly fishing meme account and is crushing it. Like, he's got like, I don't know, like he's like a month and a half in, he's got like 1,500 followers. I used to always tell him, like, dude, you're like a natural marketer. And he's like, well, I want to be a lawyer. But now he's like just doing this on the side. And like, now he's started an e-com store and he's selling stickers. Like, he's just crushing it. But that has nothing to do with his formal training, but he loves doing it. He loves learning about it. And he's like, I'm not going to let my category, like this societal category of you're an attorney and like, you must be, like a stiff prick who just like, wears a suit and tie all day. He's like, that's not me. Right. Like, yeah. I want to go fly fishing. I want to, run some digital marketing on the side. I want to have fun. Like, that's what it's all about. Just being willing to learn and create whatever you want for yourself, because the opportunity's there.
Absolutely. And like, and continue on that. Like, I think there's so many people, and especially, I saw it kind of growing up. I mean, I started at a tech school and stuff like that. And so many people don't, especially in high school, don't know, necessarily what it is they want to do, as they shouldn't. I mean, you're 17, 18 years old. I think our system, we can go, that's a totally different topic for a different day. But what's crazy to me is I've talked to a lot of people, whether it's through content, LinkedIn, like just through, and it's been crazy to me, the people that are scared to either pivot. And I think we even have those conversations, should I finish? Should I like, it's just important that you kind of have a degree. What you like, people just want to see, in my opinion, people just want to see that you have something, that you were able to do it. You stood the 4 years, you were able to, you started something, you accomplished something. it's more so just, and I do think we'll see that go away, but I think that's the biggest value point of it. Where it goes from there, as you said, is really what do you want to do and how do you want to utilize what it is? Like I know he doesn't discount, and like as you said, like even though political science has nothing to do with being a COO for an agency, but the way that you're able to articulate and think of all the different lessons that you learned, all the different topics that you did endure and all this stuff, and be able to relate it is what makes you well-rounded. And I think people always look at like, I've got to be in this straight line. Like if I want to go into accounting, I've got an accounting degree, then I've got to go through the CPA route, I've got to do this. And the whole reason that I've been able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish in the manner that I've been able to accomplish it is simply because I never actually I don't look at myself like an accountant at all. I look at myself I almost look at myself like a CEO that basically has a finance background. And that's why I come into companies and almost work in a COO, and like I work with everybody else because I have interests that far exceed accounting. That just happens to be foundationally where I work. But I've realized very early on in my career that if I go the traditional accountant route, I'm always going to be pigeonholed. And my ability to always navigate and really become more well-rounded in advertising, in content, and in surrounding myself with conversations with people like you and becoming the more well-rounded and learning lessons on lessons on lessons and taking courses that were outside of the accounting stratosphere and box or curriculum is what's actually set me up for where I'm at, because I've realized that's actually how you achieve things in life, is becoming well-rounded, not by being this one-trick pony.
100%. I mean, I think there's so few people in this world who are truly built to do one thing, for their entire lives. I think we can do one thing for a period of time, but then like we evolve and we want to do something else or evolve into something else where our passions then end up lying. And so like, to me, I think if you hone in on like just domain experience, you're missing so much. And like, to me, the thing that I look for most is just passion. Like, do you have passion? Because if you have passion, you will be able to do anything. Like that is the fire, the energy source that then creates the ability to do anything else. And so when I'm evaluating someone, like the only thing that I'm really evaluating is passion as evidenced by action, because it's one thing to be passionate about something and then do nothing, right? Like I'm so passionate about marketing, but I sit on the couch all day and watch TV. It's like, great, your passion is taking you nowhere. Yeah. But if your passion leads you to action, like I'm really interested. Like I love these kids who I'm interviewing now for like associate positions that are like, I really love sports. And it's like, I joined the radio broadcast at school and I'm now like, hosting a radio show on sports. Then I started my own podcast and I've got like a video series with my friends. We like travel around and go watch other teams because it's not enough just to watch our own school's team. Like that, I'm like, okay, you have a passion and you've attached it to action. You're willing to actually make that shit come to life. I'm like, those are the people on my team, because as long as we can direct those passions towards the things that are relevant to us, the action's going to come because you've already evidenced that. And like, I want someone that's going to continue to evolve their passion and evolve what they do with that passion, because that's what achieves results.
1,000%. And like, I could not agree with that more. And that's actually another thing, like when I talk about consulting and a lot of what I focus on, when I talk to employees that aren't motivated or, they hate their jobs, the people that are, kind of I'll be blunt and just say the cancers of the office, those are the people that, I spend the most time with, because I'm always kind of curious as to why, because once again, I always look at that. It's usually not them. It's that they haven't been set up, in a system that is going to make them, work or thrive. And maybe that job isn't for them, but they obviously haven't figured it out. And I at least want to give them, I want to at least talk and try to figure out what that source is. And what I always come back to is having that conversation. Like, so what is it you kind of enjoy doing? And I try to find parallels between, what their hobbies, what their interests are, what their skills are. Because a lot of passions are usually a passion because you're good at it. It's a weird thing. Like, there's very few people. I mean, like, sure, there are probably people that are horrible at basketball. I can't but maybe you're good at analyzing it. You're good at, like, there's some skill associated with what it is. it's very hard to find people that are absolutely like shit at something but truly love it. There's usually some sort of skill or mental, some that drives you. And so I'll usually try to find out like what those skills are, because it's easier to develop a passion in my mind that stems from something you are good at, because then you want to work to get better, you want to continue to improve, and you're seeing the fruits of your labor pay off, and it's this cycle. But a lot of different ways that I'll kind of approach it is, once I kind of find those things, sometimes you'll find that people's passions are traveling. Maybe it's their kids, maybe it's their husbands or their spouse or whatever. And where I try to dictate that is then how can I motivate them through whatever their passions and whatever their whatever gets them fired up to this job. And like at one of my last roles, I was working with inside sales individual who her kids were her entire life, and she was a little bit of a cancer to the workplace. She was kind of like the water cooler type of negative talk. This company's like all that. And people think the staff doesn't know, any decent knows who the problem people are, but it's a weird hiring crisis, or it was at least 2 or 3 years ago. And I literally sat her down, and we had probably a week's worth of just sat down every other day for 2 weeks or whatever, but like 7 days worth of meetings I booked out. And I found out that the kids were passionate. I never formalized it I'm going to try to make you more positive and well-rounded in the workplace. But it basically came to her kids were passionate, and I told her how, she wants to provide more for her kids. She doesn't think she can travel enough. So we started building in these incentives of if you can perform, if you can do this other stuff, we'll give you more vacation. I don't give a shit. Well, if you realize if you do more, we can pay you more. And then you can and basically we built this passion around her doing inside sales, which I don't think she gave a shit about. Actually, I pretty much know she didn't give a shit about the job, but that job she needed to provide for her kids, and just built up the passion around her kids. And she literally within a quarter her numbers were up in the hundreds of percents. She was showing up on, it was nuts. The negative talk stopped. And it was literally just because we found out that her passion was this, related to the job, build that around and kind of commingle the two. And it literally was a game-changing thing. So it's really interesting to hear your talk about your brother and how he because when you can develop a passion around it, it doesn't really matter you don't really need much more push than that. You're kind of going to go after it and just start doing it yourself, which is what a true leader's role is to actually do, is to get the most out of each and every employee.
100%. I think that ties perfectly back into what we were talking about before, which was high value versus low value tasks. It's going to be impossible to hire the perfect person for every role. You're always going to have people that is that exact scenario, someone that doesn't give a shit about inside sales, but is sitting in that inside sales role, and you need them to perform. And so the highest value function at that point is a manager or someone, whether it's a formal manager or not, that can come in and help get the best out of that person, to help the company. And I think that is such a great example of that, how a proper manager and a proper relationship with a manager can get the best out of someone who otherwise would be, that cancer of the office, and actually bring the whole company down.
Absolutely. And actually, if we would go into it, I won't go into the entire story, but that actually story hits on every single point we've almost made thus far. There's a reason that I was talking inside sales, because their manager said it can't be done. She's been here for this many years. It's not worth my time. It's not worth my effort. And me being in the CFO seat was basically well, fuck it, somebody's got to do it. I was like, somebody's got to do it. I'm not going to listen to that, that it can't be done. I need to see the results. So screw it. Let's get it done. So it's funny how in all of these little micro stories, all of these traits are exemplified on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that anyone that's still watching at this point, or we do a synopsis, it comes down, or a summary, it comes down to there are certain traits that are, I don't want to use the word admirable, there's certain traits that gets people into the roles that we're talking about, and gets people into the seats and the opportunities that they really want it, that everybody, I think, strives to get to, but for one reason or another doesn't wind up reaching it.
100%.
So I know we've had you here for up over an hour. I think this is the longest podcast we've done up to this point. But truly, I know we could probably continue talking all day. But what would you say, like kind of on this to wrap up, what would you say are the biggest traits that have benefited you to get to where you're going, and that you know look to continue carrying you on your career moving forward?
I think one is never take for granted the people. I mean, everything that I have today is more a function of the people that are in my life and the relationships that I've been fortunate enough to kind of grow over the years. And so I think, never, never, ever take for granted the people. And I mean that in the sense that, like, always embrace new opportunities, always embrace meeting new people. The same way we were talking about, nothing is beneath you from a task. No person is beneath you either. Like, be willing to meet every single person, because you never know, where that relationship might take you. But also don't forget, like, the people that helped pave the way for you along the way, even if they're not a part of your life day to day anymore. Like, they're a part of your journey, they're a part of your story, and don't like just talk about it and remember it. Embrace that, reach out to those people, continue to let them know that you don't take them for granted, because those relationships will take you really far in life. And I think it's also just like, that's just part of being a good person, right? Like, keeping in touch with the people in your life. And so continue to open doors, continue to meet new and interesting people, but also deepen the relationships that you have with the people that are in your life. And like, that's something I absolutely intend to continue to do throughout my career. Like, I don't want to lose any of these relationships, whether it's relevant to me from like a business perspective right now. Like, I don't think about it in terms of how it's going to provide me with monetary value. I think about it in terms of, like, the value is not monetary. The value is just having these people as a part of my life, the way that they've helped influence me. And so, I think that's super key.
I honestly wish I could give that a standing ovation. I want to like add to it, but that literally, like, that I could not agree with what you just said more. That was we're gonna clip that 6 ways from Sunday, because that was amazing.
Yeah, no. So I think there's that, and then I think it's pushing beyond what is expected of you is really key. And I mean, if I had, taken my job at RG and just like looked at the, printed out the spec and said, like, this is my role, and every time something was about to go outside of that role was like, no, like, this is what I'm getting paid to do, so I'm only going to do this, like, I would have gone nowhere, right? I'd still be like a director of client strategy, like, spinning up marketing campaigns every day, which wasn't a bad thing to do, but I wanted a little bit more, and this has to come from within. Look, this is not going to be the case for every person. Some people literally just want to go to work and like do their 9 to 5 and do what's on their spec and call it a day. There's nothing wrong with, like, if that's what you want to do, like, there
people too, by the way. I think everyone
every company needs those people, and like, that is 100% like a valid thing to go and do, and like, there's no shame in that whatsoever. But for me, like, I want to continue to grow myself. I am not like a complacent person. I really like my professional life. Like, it's a passion of mine to, like, continue to grow professionally. So I know, like, personally, my professional life is important to me. And so I want to continue to grow professionally. And so it's always about pushing outside of the comfort zone. And it's always about taking on more. And I think the thing that has benefited me the most is obsessing about things that weren't my responsibility to obsess about. So like, when I just joined Archie, I had no operating role, but I was interested in company revenue. I was interested in company profit. I was interested in our processes. I was interested in the ways we were creating more efficiency. And I started, creeping into those areas and like taking on responsibility that wasn't just like handed to me to take on. I started to identify those things and started grabbing them. And I think if you're able to do that, if you're able to identify gaps, if you're able to be the person who sees the problems and can come with a solution, you're going to go so much further. And I know in the same way, not every person wants to be that person. Not every company wants someone that is going to be like me, who's going to come in and constantly be pushing on we need to improve this, we
Yeah.
need to improve that, or identifying gaps and trying to create solutions for it. Some people will just find that annoying, and it's like, leave me alone, and we want to operate the way we're operating. But like, that's me.
And then that's just not the job for you either. There's always someone who's gonna like welcome that with literally open arms.
Exactly. And so, I mean, that's, I think that's the other thing that I'm going to continue to push on anywhere in my career, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm working at an agency, I'm working in-house, I'm starting my own thing. It's like taking real accountability and real ownership for things, even if they weren't handed to you formally. It's like, you must own this, you must take responsibility for this, being willing to take on more of that responsibility yourself. Because it takes you so much further, if you're willing to do that. At least in my opinion, and the way things have panned out for me, that's rung true.
Absolutely, and like, just to strengthen those points, I'll give 2 quick stories that popped in my head from my experience that literally strengthens those. So, your first point about people being literally everything, that you never know what situation or what conversation is going to wind up being vitally important to you either later in life, if not immediately, and in ways that you don't know. So I don't know if you've seen any of his content on LinkedIn, but if you haven't, do check him out. He's a wonder kid. His name's Sam Lister. I actually he DM'd me. I literally, the first time I ever thought about doing content, I just started Every Second Accounts. This is probably 3.5 coming up on 4 years ago. And I just like did a point and shoot, like, and did some quotes and posted them, like on like, very Gary V-esque shit, and I did it for like a month, but like within that month of me doing it, he had reached out and DM'd me, and he had to be 16 years old at the time. And I was already, I think I was in my first, I was in my controller role. I just started Every Second Accounts, just kind of like bubbling this and that. I was in the back half of my college life, so busy, like literally where like, and he DM'd me, and like, it's this random 16-year-old kid who I, vaguely know. He went to my same high school, I never knew him, he's younger than, but he reached out and was like, hey, I saw that you're doing content, do you mind, would you want to get a coffee with me or something? And I've always had that same mentality and attitude, and I was just like, I really don't have the time, but sure, let's put an hour, I'll drive downtown, Milwaukee, and we'll just chop it up. And went behind the ears as much as you can imagine, like literally, is bringing up like, I'm thinking about doing this content thing, I really don't have, a camera or anything, but I want to create like this video agency or like, video marketing, or I don't really know where I want to take it. I'm going to call it, I think it was like MKE Vlogs at the time. And I was just like, all right, cool. Like I was like, I don't think you should call it MKE Vlogs. I think, I was like, you probably have plans to grow it outside of the city, some days. Like, yeah, you're right, actually. Like I probably should. And that's how he came, then he worked on Blank Slate Media was the next name he came up with. But basically, like, we sat down and it was really nothing. I was like, okay, sounds good, like, could have looked at it like it's a waste of time, but I was like, no, cool, it felt good to have someone asking me at this point in my career. I was like, it's cool if someone's asking me for entrepreneurship help. I'm so new, like, it felt weird. And I don't know if we probably didn't talk for a few months, this or that, more than just, DM, like, hey, I appreciate it, of course, no worries. And it literally, obviously, like, he's one of my best friends today. Like, he's grown, his company just crazy exponentially. Some of the stuff he's working on in the background that you'll see roll out in the next few months is just absolutely nuts what he's been able to do. I mean, he's literally one of the top, I want to say 5-10 content creators on LinkedIn. His engagement is just fucking massive. It's nuts. And actually, he was the one that pushed me with ESA, because I kind of got, I was kind of, like, I'm the one, now I go to him for my entrepreneurship journey, because, and he's helped me break out of my 9-to-5 type world into this new sector. And literally the whole reason we first met up was because he thought that I was doing it, and it was like, and I was doing him a favor, and now he's literally my go-to. And I can't even express, like, literally, we just talked to him for an hour yesterday, like, he's literally one of my best friends, like, the value that we both provided each other, but especially, for the sake of the story, from him to me, it was a meeting that if you looked at it and said, the ROI of this is going to be 0, you should never go. And that's just one example of that happening in my life, and I could give you another 5 or 10. like just off the top of my head, and it's literally off of taking a meeting with then a 16-year-old and that letting that relationship build. And it's nuts. So like literally there's nothing more important than the relationships and people that you have in your life, because that's going to set the foundation for the opportunities that you get down the road.
1,000%.
So I could not agree with that more. And I'll, to your second point, my first accounting internship that I ever had, I literally was, I mastered the, filing and shit like that, within the first week. And I was just, and I was like, I started asking and this once again carried me through my career. I've done this at every role since, whether it was the control, whether it was the AR or accountant, or then the controller, then the CFO, or now the CEO, and companies I work with, is always, what's the shit that you don't want to do? What's the stuff that's giving you the most problems? What's taking up the most time of your day? And give me it. Let me fix it. Let me either do it, fix it, solve it, some way or the other. I want to be the biggest asset and value to you that I can be. And I always wanted the shit work, because I thought that's going to make me indispensable. Because if I take the shit work that everyone wants, the glorious task, everyone wants to sit there and, sit in a meeting and just be able to provide some, insights and then go home, But I was like, I want to do this shit work, because if I can take off all the work that nobody else wants to do, I'm never going to get fired, because everyone's going to know if I fire that person or let them go, or if they leave, I'm basically able to name my own price always too, because if I leave, they know that they're going to get all that shit that they never wanted back on their plate. So it was really grabbing opportunity, and never really, I always let the money find its way. I let the titles find its way, I just took on every opportunity or every type of responsibility that I could, and just had blind belief that the rest was going to figure itself out. And I think that those 2 points that you mentioned are literally like the exact 2 answers that I would have given. And I don't want to hone in on the points anymore, because I think you did such a tremendous job, but I wanted to give those 2 examples just to showcase, like, once again, the parallels in thought and in, action, because that's literally foundationally what set my career as well. So I could not agree more.
Yeah, no, and I love both of those. And as you were just talking, it just made me think of a third, which is just inject value into other people's lives with no expectation of return. And like, this is being talked about a lot. And I think Gary Vee, probably harps on this a lot as well, but just, it costs you nothing to give someone else whatever value you can, right? Whether it's, that hour-long meeting with Sam, he wanted some advice, it didn't actually cost you. You could calculate
if I'm worth X an hour and it's gas and
but if you have some time, in reality, it doesn't cost you anything. Or even, I started now, there's kids from my college who were applying for positions at RG that weren't qualified. But I'm like, what? Let's just, if you want it, I'm willing to spend 30 minutes with you to talk about ways that you can strengthen your resume for the future. I have no expectation for return on that, right? And I've got too much shit going on in my life already. I don't need to spend that 30 minutes. But to me, I'm like, someone else has done it for me in the past. I want to pay that forward. But who the hell knows, man? One of these kids could be running the next Facebook. And they're like, yo, Jay, do you want a job with early options? Who knows? You never know what's going to come back to you. But I don't believe in karma, but I do believe you just throw as much value into the world as possible, and it will eventually, in some way, shape, or form, come back around and help you. It can't not. If you're truly giving people value in life, you will, in some way, shape, or form, get value back. And so I think, just selflessly throw yourself out there, give as many people as much value as possible for free, expecting nothing. And you will probably, reap more out of that than you would have ever thought.
Absolutely. And I want to, kind of piggyback on that a little bit. So I don't believe in the traditional, definition of karma, as you mentioned, but I do wholeheartedly believe that the energy that you give is the energy that's going to come back to you. And really, on that point, the more meetings that you take, it's a play on the word luck, and keep the word luck in your pocket. But I believe that, I think it's a Russ lyric, luck comes to those in motion. And I've really used that as a North Star for me, because I've always thought the more people I meet with, the more opportunities, that I put in front of me, the more, even doing this podcast, and the more, the videos I'm putting out,
Yeah.
I like these videos could do 5 views, they could do this, but even us sitting here and talking is strengthening our relationship. There's so much stuff that you don't think of that comes outside of the things that you're doing in a day-to-day, and you never know who you impact. You never know who's watching this stuff. You never know who you're meeting with. Like, as you said, like I could also name another, 10 stories of people that weren't Sam, that like I sat down with and nothing ever came of it or this or that. But all you need is one. All you need is a couple, and all you need is like, that could like exponentially change the, trajectory of your life and career as you know it today to make it worthwhile. I mean, it's literally the venture capitalist world. All you need is that one Coinbase or that one Facebook. You can invest in 100,000 companies, but that one hit, it changes your life forever. And that's exponentially true with people as well. Because you never know what someone's going to mean to your life today, tomorrow, or 20 years down the road. Because you never know where you're going to be at. You never know where they're going to be at. And at some point, those, your lives might cross or match at the perfect time. And the more relationships and opportunities that you set up for yourself, the better off that you're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as a recipient too, like if you've ever been on the receiving end, and everyone has been at some point, there's people who have invested in you the
Yep.
same way that we're talking about investing in others. And they might not have ever gotten a tangible return from you, but I've now made a point to try and reach out and thank them for the return that I've gotten, even though it hasn't come back to them. So like I had a professor who was like a informal mentor to me and like taught me a lot about like early research techniques and like early psychology and whatnot. And she has no idea how I'm doing, but I made a point last year to reach out and be like, I just wanted to reach out and let you know, like I use these skills every single day in my professional career. And like, it's been incredibly monumental to me. And like, I try to at least once a year, but really I should be doing it more often, reach out to those people who have no idea how I'm doing, but had invested in me to let them know that the investment they made was impactful. And I think just that reminder to them is huge because it also makes them want to continue to do that, right? Like they're like, shit, like even though I didn't, like reap a reward from you, knowing that you're doing well because I had invested something in you, like I want to do that with more people. And so I think that's like another little thing that you can do to make a really big impact in your life and other people's lives. Like remind people that they gave you value if they don't recognize that.
Absolutely, and I definitely don't have a school story because I was a piece of shit student. And all my
I actually have one. I actually reached out. I took like 2 years off after my last. I had 1 semester left, just an internship. I took 2 years off before I finished. But after I did finish, I reached out to a professor that I had classes maybe 2 years. This was like last year, but I had her class like 2-3 years ago. I reached out and kind of did a similar thing like you. It wasn't any like super tangible things, but it was more so just like being like a good person. Just like that's kind of the class was more just broadening, opening your mind to being more mindful.
The feedback I've always gotten is it makes a huge impact on them too, like to hear that. Just to not, again, like the same way we talked about, not many people take up opportunities. It's amazing how few people will reach out and like be thankful or show appreciation. And so like you really stand out when you're the person who's like, hey, I haven't talked to you in 5 years. I just want to let you know you had a huge impact on me. And like, you've really helped with the trajectory of my life. Like I guarantee you they don't get that incredibly often. And so like, it's a really big deal, even though it's a small thing for you. Maybe you spent 15 minutes like drafting a note, it's like a big thing for them when they receive that. And so I think it's just like one of those little things that you can do to really, help everyone, because hopefully, the next recipient, you're not even going to know, but they're going to help other people because they feel good and fulfilled from doing that in the past.
Absolutely, and that's the example I have. So you met him at my wedding, but I really had an accounting mentor. His name's Dan Hinkhouse, and when I started my first role with him, they hired me to do AP. It was my first real accountant's role. I was kind of an internship, some more AP AR specialist stuff before that, and he literally was like, hey, we're a 2-person accounting team. Like, you can take on whatever you want to take on. I'm here to help you as much as you want me to help you. Just prove to me that you can do it. And literally within 3.5 years, I went from, being hired, the first month as an AP specialist to leaving, as a controller. And that was the most fundamentally foundational shifting, opportunity that I ever had. Literally, like I attest my entire career, to him. And I mean, he was at my wedding, you know, like, and we do kind of the same thing. We check in, you know, usually every quarter, this and that. But I, you know, randomly get in my feels a bit and send that same stuff. It's like, yo, I like, even if it's like not even if it's not, you know, paragraphs, it's just like, yo, I was just thinking about like how thankful and grateful I am. And like, I mean, he probably watches, he engages on all this shit anyways. But to say like where you like to then reciprocate it, you know, he's obviously at a different company today and this and that, but he's got, you know, he's still in the CFO role, and he's told me stories like, yeah, you know, I hired this new kid, I hope he's the next son, you know, I hope he's like, you know, because like you took this and like I hope I can build someone else's career in that manner. I always make sure the kid's not doing better than I did, because I do have the ego going on, but literally almost to the T, an example of what you mentioned. So I could not, you know, agree with that more. And obviously hearing that reciprocated from all three of us who had no idea coming in, we're all going to mention, we all have an example of that, and I think that's awesome. So I'll let you get back to your day, but I'll kind of close up. You've had a pretty, you know, as we went over, you've had a pretty cool story. Where do you know, I never asked you for 3, 5s, and 10s, you know, year plans, because I think those get squashed and shifted as we've talked about. You can never really plan it. But what's next for you? Like perfect case scenario.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I love keeping the doors of the world open to see where it's going to take me. I mean, in the next 3, I want to build this RG rocket ship and want to continue. I think every year I say this, but I think we're at like a turning point for the business, and every year it continues to kind of prove itself out. And so we're at like, I think the most exciting, most difficult stage of growth right now. And I think it's going to take about 3 years to see it through. And so that really is like, if we're talking about just like a 3-year timeline, it's growing RG to the level that we are kind of, we actually just did a formal vision exercise. And so growing it to that point. After that, I don't know when the hell it's going to happen, but I want to do my own thing. So I have no idea what it will be. I have no idea, you know, the one thing I do believe is it's not going to be the service industry. I fucking hate the service industry.
Wow, that actually is shocking to me. It's very rare for someone who's worked traditional service to make the pivot and vice versa. So that is awesome and very exciting.
It is so damn hard. And I mean, you know this, like,
of course.
It is so damn hard to build a service business.
And to scale the service business, to scale is, yeah.
That's exactly it. It's to scale it, because ultimately everything, like your only unit of economics is time.
Mm-hmm.
And time is so finite, and different people use time in different ways. And the way to grow a great business is to overservice clients, and that's sacrificing on margin. And so it's just so hard. I mean, anyone that is like growing a technology business, I mean, you need to have amazing product. Don't take me, you know, I'm saying this in like 10 seconds, but it's so fucking easy to grow a software business.
Yeah.
When you have a SaaS model with annually recurring revenue, keep your customers happy, grow new customers.
You're working on one product. You're working on one, you know, like, and I realize we're dumbing it down a shit ton for the sake of, but like, yeah, it's not like.
I'm like, you have 80 to 90% margins. You could have so much fun with all of this profit. You know, we're like, you know,
you're trying to you're nickel and diming your shit out, like race to the bottom, freaking like.
So, I mean, I think that's the one thing, I've started to identify, but you know what, we'll probably talk in 5 years and it will probably be a service business. You can point to this and be like, you're a fucking idiot. But yeah, no, I definitely have the entrepreneurial bug in me. So at some point I am going to want to have something that, you know, is kind of my baby that I started from inception. So I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I definitely think that's in the grand plans.
Absolutely. I love it. And if I can ever be of any value, I'm always here. If I can ever assist you on that journey, or I'm always,
you're going to be too big for me by that point, Sutton. You're going to be way too big for me. You're going to be like, I'll refer you to some little rinky firm that is.
Well, I mean, this was awesome. I know we took up a lot of your time. I tremendously appreciate it. If I can ever return the favor, if you ever get back on the podcast gig, I'd be happy to I'd be happy to hop back on yours. But truly, thank you so much for this. This is, you know, the value you provide to the conversations. I think it's been absolutely tremendous. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. This was a ton of fun and great to meet you, Sam.
Yep, pleasure meeting you as well. Thank you very much.
Certainly talk soon, Jay. Have a great rest of your day, man.